First, let me just thank everyone. There's so many great ideas. My brain is buzzing with connections. So I'm going to actually try and stick to my script here without herring off in all different directions. So I'm going to do a bit more reading than I originally intended to do. So the first step in fixing a problem, I think, is identifying a problem. And science is a couple, and we've talked about them today in our small groups. There's the diversity problem. The U.S. News and World Report recently noted that the United States STEM workforce is no more diverse now than it was 14 years ago. So we're missing those insights and talents from women and minorities and those with disabilities who are still not participating in STEM studies or careers. There's also a lukewarm level of trust in science in the United States. It's not getting worse, though sometimes people think that. It's kind of staying steady. But according to a Pew Research Center study, only 4 in 10 people in the United States report a great deal of confidence in the scientific community. And it gets even more varied in terms of response when you're talking about issues such as climate science or genetically modified food or energy sources. Simple communication about scientific facts is not the answer to these issues. Trust, in particular, is challenging to build as facts rub up against political or religious beliefs, which are ingrained in a person's identity. And a scientific identity is exactly what we need to build if we hope to have groups currently underrepresented in the field study, join, and persist in a STEM career or simply gain STEM literacy. This is where conscious targeted outreach and engagement to new audiences comes in. Now, this flash talk is not a place for a doctoral dissertation around the subject, so I'm going to give some quick hits to ideas which have informed the way we try and address these issues at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum. So first up, we let go of the idea that the scientist or the science educator knows all, and no one else has anything to offer. As was referenced earlier, too often the picture that pops up when you ask someone to think scientist is male and often white. So leveraging indigenous knowledge has become part of the conversation in STEM education and some research relatively recently. Indeed, the National Museum of the American Indian here in New York City, if you have a chance, they have just opened a new section on the math and science practiced by Native American nations historically. It's very cool and very hands-on, and it's very free because it's Smithsonian, all the way downtown. In our work at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum, we think of using indigenous in its meaning of occurring naturally within a place, rather than connecting to a traditional culture. So when working to engage audiences with STEM concepts, particularly youth and families, through our community engagement and youth leadership programs, we provide programs in and or recruit participants from high-need areas of the city. We leave a lot of room and opportunity for participants to become the expert and to share what they already know and understand, to connect to and show off the science behind their interests, talents, and everyday practices. Examples would be showing and sharing food preparation techniques that involve sophisticated understanding of the fermentation process or chemical reactions behind hair and beauty traditions. It is essential, if you want participants to develop their identity as people who engage with science daily in a masterful way, that you approach the topics with respect, encourage them to take the lead, and look at it as a facilitated experience where we are all learning together instead of an expert imparting knowledge from on high to the ignorant. In short, we're employing the best practices of teaching. And again, I would argue, as has been pointed out here, that science outreach can learn a lot from pedagogy. Aside from making sure we're going to where these audiences are, libraries, community centers, schools, public housing developments, even prisons, when designing programs and experiences, we at the museum spend a good deal of thought on finding relevant entry points based on interests of the target audience and or individuals within that audience. And just as an aside, to get that, like with NYCHA, New York City public housing complexes, we are developing community feedback groups. So again, what they need, what they want, what they understand, what they're worried about in terms of bringing their families to the museum, and how we can ease all those concerns and find those relevant entry points. So having programs exploring the algorithms behind something like Spotify or the way music is produced, mixed, and engineered and recorded is a great way to engage music-obsessed teens, for example. connecting to the familiar and the areas they feel confident in, and stretching their thinking and experiences to new STEM concepts, building scientific literacy, and once again, a scientific identity. Identifying these hooks and providing connections from these interest-based STEM explorations to possible STEM-based careers is especially important for many individuals from underrepresented groups who may be the first in their family to think about attending college, or may already be thinking about and working on a practical level to contribute to family support, even as young as 13 or 14. Well, no one doubts that being a doctor or a dentist or research scientist is a way to have an income. Medical school is a long and costly process, and challenging to imagine as a path for a kid whose schools didn't have advanced maths or sciences and who at 16 isn't an A+ student in these areas. These subjects are generally taught completely divorced from the world these students live in, so they're not always successful at them at first. Technology is engaging and exciting, but we see there are challenges to attracting and keeping individuals from underrepresented groups, particularly women. So one of the main things I think we do well at the museum for all audiences, but particularly for our Goals for Girls program, is provide opportunities for them to meet and ask questions of people who look like them at different levels in their careers with different career paths, many of which do not involve working alone in a lab or 10 years of medical training or any of these other things that they imagine goes into being a scientist or working in a STEM field. In the last year, we've had an array of career and mentorship day participants, such as the first Black female astronaut in space, fabric engineers from Coach, chemists from L'Oreal, and a young woman whose career has had her both figuring out those algorithms for music sales and touring as a drummer for the artist MIA. Best of all, in our youth leadership programs, we work with our kids explicitly on communication skills, and we hire them as paid interns or eventually junior education staff. When a new family visits our museum or a library where one of these staff members is facilitating a program and sees someone who looks like them, perhaps speaking in their home language, facilitating an experience that explores a complicated scientific concept, I think that does more to engage new audiences and help create a scientific identity among those who hadn't seen themselves in that light before than anything else we do. So 3 minutes under, and I am done.
I'm guessing we have lots of time for several questions.
If there's anything left.
3 questions.
Oh, there's somebody. And while the mic goes to her, I'm going to make a quick pitch. We are working on a year-long NSF grant to try and put together methods for doing mid and longitudinal studies of girls in STEM programs at museums and science centers. So if anybody wants to play, let me know.
Thanks for that talk, Lynda. I'm a big fan of your work. One of the questions that I continue to kind of wrestle with, and when you mentioned putting scientists in front of students who look like them, is how we continue to ask for volunteers, or not necessarily volunteers, even paid professionals, to come in and give their time and work to be the demonstration of someone who looks like you can be a scientist, while at the same time not asking that of typically their white male peers. So how do we continue to justify using the time of current scientists while leaving white males at the bench to continue to pursue their careers without interruption? And how can we balance that in a way that might be beneficial to all parties?
That's a great question. And we don't leave them on the bench. We get them out for other things, for like public panels and things like that. So we definitely make use of them, absolutely. I think that for the women that we ask for, particularly for the Goals program, a lot of them are coming from industry. So unlike academia, they get paid days to go volunteer. Like, that's part of the structure of their environment. And they realize it was such a struggle for them, very much being the only girl or in their coding class at school, the only woman in their college program, or one of 5 or something, that this idea of building a network with these young women, it's a 10-year-old program now, so it's nice, it's got a whole sort of peer network going on, is really at their heart. So I think it's something they would do even if they weren't compensated for it. But it's much easier for people who are not in academia, because academia doesn't always honor a deeper work towards tenure track. So for the younger staff, the younger faculty, it is difficult.
We have a follow-up over here.
Mm-hmm.
I would say to her question that there are groups like Black in STEM, Latino in STEM,
if you follow them on Twitter and various other communities, where their response would be, how dare not ask us? Because this is the work that we understand that we're supposed to be doing, because we are at this level and we understand what is behind us and we have to pay it forward. Many of the groups that we work with at UNC Chapel Hill, one of those is the creator of the Twitter handle Black in STEM. That is part of her work, who she is. When she takes on a postdoc position, it's understood that I'm going to be doing science outreach for this purpose, for this topic. And so many others in that community as well, whether we're talking about astrophysicists or astronomers like Jediah Eisler or Danielle Lee, some of those, it is part of their work and understood. So I think they're creating a culture where many who are underrepresented scientists in their field understand that this is part of what is required of us, what is needed to change the landscape in the future. So I don't think, for many of them, not saying all, but it's not asking, it's not stretching, saying that why leaving out white males, but it's saying that this is work that we must do.
I actually want to echo that because, and also say that for 2 years I did work with the Goals for Girls at the Intrepid Sea. So, and I remember when I was reached out to ask me, I was a grad student, and I luckily had a PI who was very generous with how often I really needed to be in the lab. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily, am I going to get paid to do this? It was, how can I not do this? And how can I actually expose myself, A, to these students, but then also to other individuals at the Intrepid, so that I can get more opportunities to do this? Because maybe while, you know, white counterparts, maybe the reason they can say no is because they get asked all the time to do these things. And so for these opportunities, I took them as much as I could because I saw it as paying it forward. So I just wanted to echo what you were saying, because I actually had a conversation with Jedidah about this very thing. And that was the thing that she said, that she saw it not as an extra thing, but as an extension of what she was already doing.
So can we get one more? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'll make this comment quick. My name's Sarah McAnulty. I run Skype a Scientist. And one nice thing that when we're like planning big scale outreach events or programs, one thing that we focus on is making sure that the minorities that we do have don't get, like, quote unquote wasted on white kids. So so that we make sure that we're making use of every person to their best ability. And when you're planning one of these programs that are huge, that's something that you should, like, just for all of us in the room to, like, keep in mind. And there are also a lot of underrepresented groups in the US that a white dude is awesome for, like a rural community that wouldn't see a scientist otherwise. We never don't want the white dudes participating. We absolutely do, and we can use every single one of them. But we want to make sure they're going to the right place. And if you have, like, big algorithms to sort of help get people to where they're best used, that's really powerful.